I want to say just a tiny bit about what's going on with the Universal Ostrich Farm in British Columbia, which sounds like it has nothing to do with this, but it really does.
No, it really does.
It really does. So the Universal Ostrich Farm in British Columbia, not too far from the U.S. border here on the West Coast where we are, has had ostriches for decades. And in December 2024 and January of this year, they had 69 of their flock die. And it is presumed that they died of avian flu, although that isn't actually certain. All of the living herd, of which there are 400-ish individuals, have been, quote, according to a September 6 article in Rebel News, healthy and symptom-free for 235 days. So they had a substantial fraction, less than a fifth, but a substantial fraction of their flock, which they've had for decades, die. But the vast majority of them have been healthy and symptom-free for much more than half a year. It's now come to a head because the Canadian, I don't remember what the acronym is, but the Canadian Animal Safety something regulatory structure is saying that the entire flock needs to be culled in order to get avian flu out of existence. And of course, the owners of the farm and many other people, largely being reported on again at Rebel News, have said this is ridiculous. These animals are healthy. You also have no right to declare our animals unsafe when there's no evidence that they are, and kill our animals, which will inherently kill our business. But compare that to the mainstream coverage, of which there hasn't been a lot, but we have, for instance, in Politico, and this is just in chronological order of 3 articles that I found covering this story. So this is going to be mid-July. Politico, why RFK Jr. wants Canada to pardon 400 ostriches. So right away, the way into this story is it's Bobby Kennedy. You know what to think, right?
Also, pardon. Which
it's true. Yeah. Pardon.
Yeah. Pardon.
So just the first 4 paragraphs of this article in Politico. Ottawa, the fate of nearly 400 Canadian ostriches, which Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is trying to save, now rests with federal justices in Ottawa. As the controversial case makes its way through court, members of U.S. President Donald Trump's administration, right-wing influencers, and a Republican megadonor are urging the Liberal government to spare the ostriches that were exposed to bird flu. The Secretary has urged Canada not to kill the ostriches, but to do further testing to try to better understand the virus, a spokesperson for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services told Politico. MAGA supporters and Canada's Freedom Convoy, which blockaded Ottawa for weeks over COVID-19 measures, have coalesced around the cause, which they say is an example of government overreach and erosion of institutional trust and outdated policies. So there's a lot to object to here, but just the entire framing is, if you agree with this stance, recognize that your fellow travelers are MAGA supporters and Freedom Convoy supporters, and their description of blockaded Ottawa for weeks over COVID-19 measures. Everything about the descriptions here are wrong, but also they are just trying to make you feel icky about thinking that maybe the ostriches should be saved because other people who think that are far right-wing lunatics, like apparently us. Here we have a couple weeks later in the Wall Street Journal, why America is rallying to save 400 Canadian ostriches. A plan to euthanize birds prompts RFK Jr. and other U.S. officials to come to the animal's defense, and an offer from Dr. Oz. So again, just a little bit from the middle of this article. It is government overreach at its worst because we have rights as landowners, said Katie Pasitny, whose mother, Karen Asperson, is co-owner of the farm. The animals have recovered from the outbreak and have developed herd immunity, she said. These animals, we own them, the government doesn't. Under Canada's policy for dealing with avian flu outbreaks, officials will kill any commercial flock whose members have been exposed. Canada's Food Inspection Agency has said even if the rest of the herd doesn't show symptoms, the virus may be dormant and could mutate. Killing the entire herd is the best way to ensure it doesn't spread. And that's just a statement in here as if it's true. The world has been lucky that the virus hasn't spread widely to humans, said Dr. Gregory Torres, head of the science department of the Paris-based World Organization for Animal Health. We should not leave this virus circulating.
Oh my God.
Okay, so before you respond, one more piece on this story from the mainstream media. This is WAPO, this is Washington Post. A few weeks later, August 22nd, so just a few weeks ago, Canadian court allows cull of 400 ostriches that RFK Jr. hoped to save. And here, from the middle of this piece, mass slaughter has long been the chief strategy for containing bird flu, a highly contagious disease caused by influenza A viruses spread among wild birds, aquatic birds, birds of prey, and waterfowl, as well as domestic birds such as poultry. An outbreak this year resulted in more than 120 million hens being slaughtered and egg prices rising to record levels. Humans can also become infected with bird flu, although this is rare, with cases typically involving people who come into close contact with infected birds. So lots to say here, obviously, but let me just start by pointing out that in this paragraph that I just read from the Washington Post article from August 22nd of this year, note the clever use of rhetoric. So, oh my God, bird flu. It's highly contagious. Look at all the birds who can get it. Quote, an outbreak this year resulted in more than 120 million ears being slaughtered and egg prices rising to record levels. No, it did not.
Wait. 120
million hens being slaughtered and egg prices rising to record levels.
Got it.
An outbreak this year resulted in policies being employed that caused the slaughter of hens, and once the hens were dead and therefore egg production was down because the animals that produce eggs were dead, egg prices rose. That is not attributable to bird flu. That is attributable to the policies around bird flu. And if we go back to the Wall Street Journal and the claim that the world has been lucky that the virus hasn't spread widely to humans and we should not leave this virus circulating, it seems like none of the people involved, none of the so-called experts, none of the expertise here has anything to do with evolutionary thinking. And this then harkens back to what we said, I think, at the end of the last live stream with regard to Bobby Kennedy and the chickens and what was it? Dr. Here, give me my screen back if I can for a second. Dr. Daskalakis, the CDC scientist, sorry, not Satanist.
Well, maybe that too.
Who resigned in objection to Kennedy and made a claim that he was being eugenicist when actually what Kennedy was saying was, actually, this is what selection does. If you have animals who have died, you don't kill the ones who have survived because that actually is an indication that they have survived and they have better immunity. And now we have in Canada the same argument being made. And in this case, it's going to take out not only 400 beautiful primitive birds. I don't know if they're beautiful. Many people would call them beautiful. Remarkable, interesting birds, but also an entire family's business for zero reason. And again, it's not just zero reason; it's the inverse.
Yes.
Like this
negative reason.
They are actually indicated in being more immune to avian flu should it come through again.
So they are playing us for fools in this story, right? They've engaged in sleight of hand in a number of different places. One is, you will note in that last story, the exact conflation of highly contagious with dangerous.
Yep.
Right? You know what's highly contagious? Colds are highly contagious. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that bird flu is a cold. It's not.
Right.
But the idea that we ought to be very concerned about it because it's very contagious does not follow. It needs to be highly virulent in humans for it to matter. And they tell you that it doesn't transmit to humans very frequently. Now, could it? Yeah. On the other hand, it is a generalist flu inherently. It circulates between different species of birds and from birds to mammals. So it has to be a generalist flu.
Wildly different clades of birds. Like this description here, and we can't tell exactly what all the birds are, but we know at least you've got several different clades of birds, and birds are ancient, and this isn't just affecting ostriches, or
right?
not just affecting
it's like
chickens.
If you found out that there was something circulating in hippos, it doesn't necessarily follow that because it's a mammal and you're a mammal that you need to be worried about it, right? So,
but in this case, this is a generalist bird flu.
Right. It's a generalist bird flu, which puts evolutionary constraints on it, which they are either pretending not to understand or don't understand.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm really getting from this, okay, you had an outbreak of something in this flock of 400 animals. 69 of them died. That's significant.
Yes.
The fact that 69 of them died and there are no symptomatic birds left says two things are highly likely. One, this flock, all of them having now been exposed, is now highly immune. The next time bird flu comes through, chances that this flock does disproportionately well are extremely high, right? The second thing is the likelihood that it's circulating there because there was an outbreak and we've now detected it. No, that's not how we think flu typically works.
Right.
So
it's like the people who don't believe in the health of the body, who think that terrain theory is for idiots and the only thing that matters is the pathogen, have, for the sake of this argument, because it's political, forgotten what they think they know about germ theory.
Right. And, you know, to the extent that the Daskalakis, or whatever his name was, is arguing that wanting to save these birds because they've been naturally selected to be more immune than they were, in two different ways. They've developed natural immunity and they've been selected for those who were highly vulnerable to begin with. So this is now a flock of birds that is especially robust with respect to these flus. But the idea that you would respond, even if you thought that this was, you know, if I think that a population that has survived disease is superior because it has disease resistance, A, that's true. B, that's not eugenic. And C, the right response to it is not to kill everybody who survived the eugenic event, right? That's what they're effectively arguing for, right?
The pathological event.
Right, but what they're if they are dumb enough to believe it's a eugenic event, right, that you're advocating for natural selection to have culled this herd, and then your point is, well, then kill them all, right? That's your morally superior position? That's insane, right? That makes no freaking sense.
It's utterly insane, and it feels like so much does in the last 5 and 10 years. Like, the people who are calling themselves liberals have flipped their positions without acknowledging it. These are exactly the people who would have been caring about the ostriches 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Right. And they've become pharma puppets. Yeah. And I must tell you, I've thought a lot about this ostrich story. I've thought about the culling of the chickens, which was equally insane because what it did was it left a vulnerable population. You get rid of all the chickens that have been selected or induced into having natural immunity, and you replace them with naive chickens who are now vulnerable to the next bird flu. That's exactly the opposite of what you should do. Yeah. But here's the diabolical thought that is now bubbling to the surface. If you were Pharma and you viewed natural immunity, that is non-medicalized immunity, as a competitor in the marketplace, like nature is competing with you by creating immunity that you didn't get paid for, and that is galling. You want all immunity to come from, CVS or something. So you go after herds that have, despite your best efforts, gotten natural immunity, right? And so some combination, I should separate the two terms. You've got innate immunity. Some birds are more resistant to bird flu than others. Presumably the 69 birds in this flock that died, if they died from bird flu, were more susceptible. The ones that survived either didn't get the disease in the first place because they had innate immunity, or they developed what we call natural immunity, which is the result of your immune system learning to fight the disease. Both of those things are excellent. You want a population that has, through those two things, no susceptibility to bird flu. That's what you want. Whether you're raising chickens or ostriches, doesn't matter. Whether you want to protect people by not having a circulating reservoir of bird flu, you want a flock of birds that's immune through natural processes. But Pharma, viewing natural processes as a competitor to its business, is therefore trying to wipe the slate clean of any population that has attained this through a natural process. And that is truly diabolical. What's more, I think it's an extension of a mindset in which health itself is a competitor to pharma. And you've heard people like Bobby Kennedy say that a healthy child is not profitable to pharma. But can you imagine that maybe they view it this way? I'm sure they don't view it this way with respect to their own children. But with respect to, your children, why do they care?
Yeah.
Right? The point is you're a potential profit center for life, and making sure, and this goes back to the point about the Maha report's point about medicalization.
Yes.
Right? Which includes vaccines. The whole idea is, where does health come from? Oh, it comes from doctors. And once again, Monty Python nailed it, right? Because I think I've mentioned this skit before, but there's this skit in which the doctors in the delivery room are under the false impression that they are creating a baby, right? Through technological means. And the point is, no, you're not. And pharma, the best pharma could do is it could augment health, right? That's what we should be doing, is hoping for pharma that in those cases where a healthy environment did not successfully fend off disease, that there might be some tweak that would be useful, not some insane upside down world in which health itself is imagined to come from technology. That's not how it works.
Well, and for that fantasy to stick with people and to work its fearful magic on people, we have to once again have this history in our heads of people falling over, dying in the streets all the time, just nonstop. Right. Because it's only through the marvel of modernity, modern technological fixes, that humans are healthy. That it doesn't make sense as a story, full stop, but it certainly can't even begin to make sense in people's heads as a story unless they have images of plague after plague after plague from all the moments before now, effectively.
Right. And
like the Industrial Revolution didn't just bring us industrialization, it also brought us health. But there's a reason we've never called it the health revolution, because it actually brought the opposite.
Well, and this goes to Steve Kirsch's point about the Amish, that the Amish are actually a natural control group for a lot of this. Not perfect. There's a certain amount of vaccination, a certain amount of exposure, but the degree to which the Amish are overwhelmingly healthier and don't have this chronic health epidemic is not subtle. And they're therefore, galling in a Target. And, we've seen that their right to have raw milk has been targeted and all of this. But in any case, it's an upside down world because somebody's making a profit on it not functioning very well, and right down to the level of our own physiology. And across all of these stories, I would say that there is an overarching picture developing. The body politic has become desperately sick. Now, not only is the body politic composed of people who are chronically ill, but it has a confusion about the world that is upside down and backwards and making things vastly worse. And what I think you are watching in all of the stories that we've talked about today, from, the ostrich story to the Senate hearings, is finally the dawning of a kind of natural immunity to the game that is being played on us. I will also give a shout out to Brownstone, which I think has been a beacon in the storm. It has gathered people from across the political spectrum who are awake by whatever mechanism brought them there. It has gathered them together, and you're looking at the consequences of it in the Senate, right? Any of these people in isolation would have a very hard time telling their story.
Yes.
But having come to understand each other's perspectives and learn from each other, you have a much more vibrant discussion taking place. So I really think that is the almost perfect analog to a body finally becoming immune to a disease that has nearly killed it, and recovering from the desperate flu or whatever it is. I think that's really where we are, and it couldn't come soon enough.
Yeah, no, it really couldn't.